Hi and huge welcome to you, my lovely listener. So glad you're here. Today you are joining me for a chat with Tess. Tess is a design engineer and an AI prototyper based in Pepperell, Massachusetts, and the creator of Citadel, an open source agent orchestration harness for Claude Code that turns stateless AI chats into persistent, parallel, and production grade autonomous engineering workflows. Tess, so lovely to have you.
Niklas, I really appreciate the invite.
I think we have all been playing around with Claude Code a lot, right? And my big point also lately is how can I actually run more of it? And also how can I interact in different ways with it, not just to the terminal? So I was really curious, why did you start Citadel in the first place?
Great. Yeah. So Citadel was a very interesting project for me because I didn't start out by trying to make it. Right. It wasn't like I was sitting here and I'm like, hey, you know what would be great? Let me build out a Claude Code harness that solves for all these issues and let me open source it and let people use it on their own projects. That wasn't the goal, that wasn't the plan. What I was doing is I was building this massive world building project that I've been working on for conceptually about 10 years. All right. I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, TTRPGs, and stuff like that. And so that was my passion. That was my thing. And my code base grew to over 668,000 lines of code, right? Which I'm not trying to say that means immense quality, but I'm saying that the size of it is huge, right? And agents fail at kind of doing the persistence thing over a large context, right? Keeping up with where are we at? What are we doing? What were we last working on? And so Citadel was completely born out of my own frustrations and my own frictions. And, I have pretty decent systems thinking skills, right? If you look at Citadel, and that's really what happened. It was just I kept hitting these friction points, it kept failing, and every time that it failed, I didn't sit there and say, "Oh, Claude sucks, it can't do this. I need to stop doing this." I thought, there's clearly something wrong here, and I think I can build a solution for it. So that's how Citadel really started, and eventually it got finalized, and I threw it out there and got a really good response back.
Yeah, it's interesting. So what was your main pain point when you started? So what was the point that annoyed you most?
So every single pain point is basically the same, right? It's where do I hit friction that is a bottleneck, right? Where everything slows down to a halt because of this one thing. And so every time that you see that or that I saw that was any time that I had to slow down and do something manually, right? And so the first thing is, I think of it in levels, and the basis level is raw prompting, right? You send a message into the chatbot, it responds. You send a message into the IDE, it responds. That's it. Every single time that you do that, it doesn't remember what you did in the last chat. It doesn't remember what you did before that. It doesn't really have the whole code base unless it's going to map it all out. So what I was seeing initially with raw prompting was massive token spend because every time you prompt it, it crawls the entire code base, right? And persistence issues where I just told you 3 times, don't do this, do that. And in the new chat, of course, even though it's in memory, it doesn't pull it properly. Something about it semantically doesn't pull up. So the first friction was really, why is it failing on raw prompting? That was where I started.
Yeah, and that I th- I've met the experience, and it's very interesting because these days Cloud Code tells me to start a new session, and in the past I never
Yes.
wanted to do that because I felt it lacks the context that I had in the
Yes.
old. I kind of normally I would want the chat to stay active all the time because I felt the results were a lot better. What is your experience there, and do you have an idea why they changed it at Cloud
Yes.
Code?
Those are great observations. And honestly, I think that you were doing the right thing because you were keeping that context. You didn't want to lose it, right? And you could clearly see the qualitative difference, right? You're doing it over here. It's great. You put it into a new session. You have to now re explain yourself from top to bottom, inside and out, just to get it to do the same thing that it was just doing, right? So I completely agree. The reason why I see that they changed it is because it is heavy on the token usage. I don't know if they changed how they count cache tokens. I don't know if the processes that are really hidden underneath are calling more, instances, more agents, more whatever. So it's just like token spend is going up. But whatever it was clear that the reason why they changed it was that the token count was exploding, right? And so they tell you to start a new one because two things. One, all of those cache tokens still go through. And two, When you are sending it a message in a new or sorry, when you're sending a message in the same session, over time it loses that context, right? Eventually you're going to turn over where, let's say it's 100,000 tokens, let's say it's a million, right? That's the most recent update they did in context when they had a million tokens. Eventually you're going over that. And that's if, even with a million tokens, can it find the needle in the haystack, right? The thing that it needs to find to keep doing what it's doing. So that's kind of what I saw in terms of why they changed it. It's both token spend and a context issue of memory.
Uh, And then it's parallelization that you looked at as well. I think you have a lot of agents running on the
Yes.
large code base. So what's the challenge there?
Massive challenge. So, Google output a white paper in December, late December. I can't remember the name, but it is easy to find. You can look this up. But they put out a white paper that was talking about the statistics of error rates when you use more than one agent. And the moment that you use more than one agent, it goes upwards. I don't want to misquote. I think it's like in the 70 percentile, right, of how often you're going to create some amount of error as two agents are working on the same thing, right? And so, as I was talking about bottlenecks earlier in friction, eventually, as I'm solving for raw prompting, and then I'm solving for, orchestration of how the model goes, and then I'm solving skills and hooks, which we can go back through to go through the levels. But just to answer your question, once we get to orchestration in parallel, the bottleneck was now I have to open up multiple instances myself. I have to babysit each one of them. I have to make sure that the context is right, that they're not overlapping, they're not working on the same thing. And so parallelization was something that you have to build infrastructure around to mitigate that error rate. So Google says, 70% error rate the moment you have more than one agent. My measured error rate for, and this isn't errors, these are merge conflicts when two agents go to merge, was down to 3%. Right. And so it was and from there it's a trivial fix of having an agent fix it. But that was the big unlock for parallelizations, that the bottleneck was me. I still have to do everything.
So did you ever try to build anything to also automate this part?
Yes. So everything has levels to it, right? And every level that I built was to solve that bottleneck. And every bottleneck that I experienced was usually me, right? I have to now do something manually. I have to transfer context. I have to re-explain. And now at the top level, I'm the one that's deploying Citadel, right? And so it's like I have to now say, /do, which is my orchestration command. You can put any prompt /do, calls a skill, orchestrates it to whatever's needed within Citadel, so you don't have to worry about all the technical details. But I still have to do that manually, right? So I'm still deploying. So the next step above that is creating what I called a divine alignment document, right? This is a living document, and it's based off the concept of divine alignment, where it's like mind, body, and spirit. And the idea is less about religion and more about being fully aligned in your mission, in your project, in your concept, whatever you're trying to ultimately achieve. And so I have this divine alignment document, and now what I can do is I can actually automate deployments of Citadel against that, where it will now pull up and create campaigns. It'll spin up fleets of agents, and each time it's trying to bend the entire project towards that divine alignment. So that's kind of what I've been working on lately about like trying to automate that next bottleneck that I'm experiencing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then do your agents still experience amnesia or something? How does
Yes.
it actually work? How do you cope
Good.
with
Yes.
this? Yeah.
Great question. That's one of the biggest issues is it's literally amnesia, right? The agent goes, and the moment that you call it, it's like, what were we working on? And then if it pulls up the right memories, great. So the way that I solved it was that I externalized everything. All right. It's no longer about keeping all the information in the chat window or in the terminal or in memory even. It's about writing it to disk, right? Having files that are within your agent's workflow, within their planning folders, that they can write all of the information that they're doing to. That's decisions they made, that's files they created, right? So it's really about finding that through line and documenting it. Because then what I do is every single agent that spins up reads that. It's kind of like if you're a shift worker, right? And you just left your shift, you left some notes down on the paper of what happened for the next person that comes in, right? Like that's the simplified version.
Yeah, and this is really, really interesting. And when I think about it, when should I use it? Like, when do I move on from my Claude Code installation to Citadel?
So this is I want to say this first. I want to caveat first that I'm about to tell you the answer, but I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to say that Citadel is the only answer. You have to do this. But what I will say is when you stop is the moment that you feel any friction in raw prompting. The moment that you putting something into the chat window, right, is not working, which is pretty quickly, right? It's anything past a basic project, that's when you want to use something like this. And the reason why is not because you're going to spin up fleets of agents when you're making a to-do list app or, a cooking website or a blog or whatever you're working on, right? It could be big, it could be small. But the reason is because having orchestration immediately cuts down token spend. It makes you able to scale so you don't run into the issues and then have to solve them later. Right? So like using it right from the beginning is the way to go. But I don't want that to be misconstrued as you need fleets of agents to work on whatever you're working on. And what Citadel ultimately does is it will orchestrate it for you. It'll route it for you so that you're only calling what you need for whatever the task is.
And how would I set up Citadel? Would it run on my normal Mac? Would I set up it on a server in the cloud? What do I do?
Yeah, it's really easy to set up. I have a very concise README on the GitHub, but basically you just have to clone it and then you have to point the plugin marketplace from Claude to it. It's one command. And then after that, so two commands, sorry, two commands. You clone it, you point the plugin directory to it, and then all you do is /do setup. I've built it so that it will unpack for you. It'll orient to your project, it'll create the files that are needed, and most importantly, it'll ask you questions and walk you through things, right? Because that's the biggest thing that I have found is the issue is transparency and guidance, right? Not everyone needs their hand ultimately held, but a lot of people do, especially at different levels, right? What I need my handheld at level 3, someone else needs their handheld at level 1, right? So it's all about adapting that. But the setup is pretty easy. Two commands to clone it, point it, and then a /do setup, and you're good to go.
You have a 4-tier routing system, I think, right? Can you walk
Yes.
me through it?
Yes, I can. So the 4 tiers that I have, just to make sure that I've got it. Okay. So the 4 tiers that I do is I have a instant, right? That's the first level. So when you say like you ask Claude Code for, a status report, right? That's a direct edit. That's where the model itself will just do the thing. And that is achieved through pattern matching. So that's through certain words, right? Semantics. The second one is a skill routing. So skill is through keyword matches where you're going to need to call upon a skill in Claude Code. And a skill is really just a set of instructions or information that the model uses every time it goes to do something. A very popular skill that people like is front end design, right? That's a free skill you can go and get on the plugin marketplace. So if you're like, hey, I need a new front end, what Citadel will do is it'll orchestrate it through the second tier, right? Which is matching to a skill. I want to say that both of those tiers are completely free. Right? They don't add to a token spend. They don't do anything extra except for just helping you orchestrate. The third and fourth, it's kind of a two-parter. Those go through an LLM classifier. So that's where whatever you put in is a little bit more advanced than pattern matching and keywords or regex. And that's when you'll start to have a large language model spend, say, 500 tokens or less to basically figure out what is the best plan of attack to do this. And so every time you type /do, it goes through this routing system to classify which one is best to do.
This is really interesting. And if I start out with a small project, should I still use Citadel or does it become more relevant when my code base grows?
That's a great question. And what I would ask in this scenario, because obviously, Nicholas, you have a lot of experience and a lot of education. Are you a beginner in this sense, right? If you're starting off a new project.
Yeah, in a sense that I have not set up Citadel. I would say I'm very experienced
Yeah,
with setting up new projects
sure.
in Claude Code that work extremely well with these LLM tools because for the last 2 years, I would say everything I built had to be designed to fit into the context window of an LLM. So
Yes.
if I think about architecture these days, I would build something that is optimized for work with these tools. Yeah.
Yes. So for you, right, if you're starting a new project, you would gain more from Citadel than say a newbie who is, literally just learning to vibe code, right? Or maybe they know a bit, but they haven't really gotten into Claude Code specifically, right? So if it was you, you have so much domain expertise, you have so much past experience that something like Citadel would help you a lot because what it does every time is it explains itself. It gives you a little bit of a handoff at the end. It starts externalizing, it starts orchestrating. It just solves a lot of problems that you never have to think about as an engineer. But as a brand new person, right, who's just getting used to it, I wouldn't say especially if you just feel a little overwhelmed by all this, I wouldn't say jump into this. I wouldn't say jump into Citadel, figure out GitHub, figure out cloning and all that stuff, right? Because while it's easy, there is a learning curve. I had to learn Git within the last 2 years, right? Like I wasn't using it before. I was doing certain projects, but I wasn't using it. So if you're brand new, it might be a little much, but it certainly helps, especially when you start feeling that friction, when you outgrow that beginner level.
Yeah. So what I'm also interested is in how to interact with agents. Now I've set up something like Citadel, I've pointed it in a
Yeah.
direction. I could also be using a vibe coding tool. Lately, I've thought a lot about how do we actually want to use these tools. I mean, Claude Code is
Yes.
nice, but there've been a lot of, I think really lately, I've seen a lot of people just using Telegram, for example, just using like
Yes.
your normal chat app on your phone.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that? Have you tried that as well?
Yeah, so at first I kind of thought it was a little bit of a gimmick, and I no longer feel that way. But I did it first. I felt like they're trying to create or trying to increase their exposure to people using it, right? So it's like if we make it easier to use, people will use it more, right? That's the idea. But then I started realizing how I can kind of check in remotely, right? From my phone, I can activate a remote session and I can check in on things that are running on my computer. And I kind of liked that. I started going outside, right? I started being in other places rather than just sitting at my computer. So I do think that those have their places, but I do think that they are a literally just a communication layer. I don't think that it really helps the people understand too much better. It's not as transparent, right? You're sending off a message, it does it somewhere else. But if you're already past that stage, I mean, they're fantastic for just being able to communicate with. And then the more that you automate and the more that you build infrastructure for, the less I have to think about, right? And so now I can send messages that if I didn't have any of this would be terrible, right? Like, hey, do this, and it's like I don't know how to do that, right? But so there is a huge advantage to being able to do that remotely or being able to do that on a phone.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if you've tried any of these. I've never really used Cloud Code Web before. Now I tried
Hmm.
that one as well, and I think for a single instance, if you have like a CI/CD pipeline you're deploying
Yeah.
from GitHub, it's actually really efficient. I was also wondering does this compare to Citadel? If I want to set it up, I think I'm one of these people who have this use case that I want to sometimes just send a message from my phone or from my
Yeah.
iPad, and not only from my computer. How would I do that actually? Do you have look or have you looked into that?
Yes. So this is a two-parter. The first part is that it's really easy. The second part is that it doesn't work. So the first part is that there's a plugin marketplace that Anthropic made. And Citadel is a part of that plugin marketplace. You should be able to type in slash plugins and look for it. Unfortunately, Claude Code right now has an open bug they just haven't squashed yet that basically only shows the official plugins. So it's right there, it's built in and it's on there, but you can't access it through the web version right now until that bug is squashed. So I have looked into it, and I've also looked into many other ways to try to deliver this kind of thing, in a way that's more helpful than relying on devs in the terminal, right? Bringing it into their own repos. But yeah, but just right now, unfortunately, there is an easy answer. It's not quite finished yet.
Yeah, and then who would who would start with Citadel? Is it for am I the ideal person? Is it a small team? Who would profit most if they
Great
chose
question.
it?
Yeah, so when I first found out that Citadel was going to be something that actually mattered was from a Reddit post that I did, right? And over about 9 days, that Reddit post got 500,000 views and it got 1,000 upvotes and it got over 200 comments. And I'm not saying that as wow. I'm saying that as this is a lot of feedback, right? A lot of feedback back to it. And what everyone was saying is that it was a part of my 5-level framework of like, this is where you are, this is how you level up. And then I gave Citadel at the bottom. Everyone was saying what level they were at. I'm at level 1. I'm at level 3. Oh, I agree with all of this, and I didn't have words to put it to, right? Like things like that. And so the big thing is that I don't think that it's gated behind a person of a certain experience level, but I do think it's gated behind a certain appetite, right? If you want to learn, if you want to do more than you know right now, if you want to optimize, if you want to find out where those edges are that you're just not even aware of yet, that's where something like Citadel really comes in, because what it does is it does all the heavy lifting and the more advanced thinking for you. It doesn't stop you from doing it. I can tell it to do anything I want it to do, as complex as I want it to do. I can spin up a fleet of agents to go research a topic and then build skills around it to then help me in my project. Right? Like it's incredibly helpful in very advanced ways. But as a newbie, you don't know about all that. You don't know to do research necessarily, right? You don't know to have this type of framework and this type of organization. So that's kind of where I feel it, right? If it's overwhelming, this is something that you want to take slow, right? If everything I just said overwhelms you, you might want to take it slow. But if you're hungry for a better process, if you're hungry for a better workflow, this will either do one of two things. Because one, right now, it's completely open source, completely free, and it will stay that way. Like this will stay that way. You'll be able to pull this into your repo and use it. So either you can use it or you can learn from it. And I promise there's a lot of value there if you're hungry for that kind of thing.
And where does it differentiate? I mean, if I set up, for example, Cloud Code, I can also tell it to spin off several agents, right? So I could
Yes.
also tell it, whatever, parallelize this task, send off 8 agents, or it will figure it out, actually. It will tell me how
Yes.
many agents can properly work on it and move on. What's the difference to Citadel?
Yes. Great question. So if you go to Claude right now and you say, hey, spin up a bunch of agents to work on this thing, it will do it. I've done it with sub agents and I've done it with teams of agents, which are two separate things, right? So I've done both and it works decently okay. The problem that you're going to run into is just error rates. And now I want to also say for anyone listening is that I'm pretty sure that eventually Anthropic's going to fix that, right? They're gonna build in more orchestration layers because it's a huge friction point for them. I just got there first, right? First in terms of they haven't done it yet. I'm not saying I'm the first one to ever build a harness. I'm just saying I got to this space first. I'm sure and I'm certain that they're going to be building out orchestration to help that. But the reason why it's not working now is because it creates errors. The agents will stomp on each other, right? So agent 1 goes to grab a file, agent 2 writes it, and now they're both confused about what's going on, and now they're looping like that. So that's a very easy loop that they can fall into. And the more agents that you call, that rate goes exponentially up, right? So what's the difference in Citadel? What's the differentiator? My agents all work on individual Git trees, right? So they have their own work trees that they cannot touch each other. That's one. The other thing is that they will yoink a file they're working on into their own area, so two will not work on the same thing. So agent A, agent B, they both go to the same file. Agent A moves it. Agent B goes, huh, there was a file here. Well, I guess I'll do the next thing. And then it goes and does the next thing. So basically, the easy way to think about it is that you want to isolate resources, whatever that resource is. For me, it might be a coded file. For someone else, it might be something at inference, or it might be data, or it might be input or output, or whatever it is. But you just have to isolate that from the other agents. And right now, that's not a default in Claude Code. They do have work trees. I know internally, I've tweeted at them. We've talked a bit. Internally, they are using Git work trees, and I do see that being the direction they go in. But just right now, it's not. So the big differentiator is there.
It's very interesting, right? Because if you have a lot of agents working, I would think that they at some point need to synchronize their knowledge. You can only, like, without synchronizing or without like common knowledge, common points where they are, you will only get so far and you can only parallelize so much. And I think that's okay if you want to make this trade-off. But have you thought about
Sure.
how to solve it?
Yes, I have. So right now, the way that Citadel works when you spin up those fleets of agents is that the original agent that does the task has that context. So it's kind of like you spin up a project manager. And so you never lose that contextual through line. The project manager doesn't do every single task in code, it doesn't bloat its context. Instead, it lets all the other agents do the thing. They all come together, they merge, and then the agent that started it off will address merge conflicts, will make sure it actually goes through a check where it says, hey, is this solution actually what was asked for in the beginning? Right? Because you can lose that through compaction. Your whole chat window compacts and then you lose details. So a lot of it is like it externalizes the information, it isolates the resource, and the one that kicked it off, even though say 10 other agents are working on it, the one that kicked it off is the one to close it. So there's a whole cleanup process, there's a whole merge conflict resolution process, and there's a check to make sure, is this even what I actually wanted? Is this what the user asked for? And my results have been really good on that. I haven't had the same issue that you're talking about, but I did before.
Yeah. And that's also, I didn't really ask it, but I haven't fully understood it yet. Do they still use Claude Code itself in the background, or have you abstracted
Yes.
that in some way?
Good question. So, I love Claude. Fantastic model. Claude Code, fantastic. I learned so much using it, and I've been a ChatGPT user since day one it dropped. I knew about it day one. I used their previous model on a Hugging Face clone to like test it out before it was, ChatGPT. I loved AI. I loved all that stuff. But so for Claude Code, I built it for specifically for Claude Code because Claude had the harness. They had the capability. You could build out skills and hooks and infrastructure. They already had agents you could play with, right? So I started there. It uses Claude the model, but it uses Citadel the harness. And the cool thing about Citadel that I've abstracted recently is I've added a second runtime for codecs, and I'm also abstracting even above that. I've been playing around with local models on my computer. So eventually, what Citadel is going to be is that observability and orchestration, right? The operations of what you're doing rather than the underlying model that powers it. So it's not competing with Claude the model, it's competing more with the infrastructure that makes the model so good.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And now this draws me maybe also back to yourself. How how did you end up in this space? So I think you can originally come from design engineering and computer engineering. So what is the journey that led you to agent orchestration?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really cool. I've always been interested in technology. It's just a thing that it keeps me up. It lights me up. It spins me up. It's all that stuff. I was fortunate enough to have a tech center connected to my high school. I took some engineering classes, did some bridge building competitions. Didn't go into that kind of engineering. And then when I got to college, I wanted to get into computer science, but they didn't feel like I had like the specific type of math that would make me successful. Even though I had a huge passion for it, even though I learned Python before that, for whatever reason, they just kind of were like, "Hey, the math classes aren't quite there." And so I went into computer technical engineering instead, and I did that for a bit. Um, wasn't my passion, wasn't my thing. So moving forward, I kept doing all sorts of creative tasks. I can't help but work on something. And so I have a bunch of different projects, a bunch of different creative endeavors. I'm always pushing forward. And then AI dropped, right? 2022, November, right? ChatGPT comes out, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is something that I've been waiting for, right? Like, I knew about the idea of AI. I knew about the concept of LLM. I didn't know it was coming. I didn't know it was going to like arrive, and I predicted that. But I'm saying like I understood it right from the get. And so what I immediately started doing was using it for everything I could think of. And then I would go online and I would start feeding it like things people are saying, things I would start talking about it. And then when I ran out of that, I went to the Discord OpenAI, just Discord, and I started looking at all the issues people are complaining about, where they're saying like it doesn't do this, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do this, and I started taking those into my own sessions, solving them, writing it up, and sending it directly to them. Right. And so like this was just because I just wanted to learn and I needed an excuse to do so. So take that, now take it several years out of working with just any AI model I could for years, almost every day, chatting with it, doing all that stuff. Eventually I learned enough and I wound up here. But again, I wasn't trying to wind up here. I was trying to solve my own problem, which was I was building this world building app. I was trying to encompass all domains from stories to worlds to games all in this one area. Very ambitious, very huge, and I needed that leverage point, right? I could not do what I did without it. So agents came out of a necessity. And I think that's why it makes what I'm synthesizing so valuable, because it's real. I'm not trying to posture and say, this is, this is amazing, give me $1 million, whatever. But I am saying, this is everything I've learned on real scalable projects, and here, please use it.
Yeah, and it's amazing. So I also remember the time back when ChatGPT dropped, and I tried it, and I also remember like writing the first piece of software in the sense that I just typed chats and then you copied it out. No,
Yeah.
there was no cursor. And
Yes.
GitHub Copilot, I think, also didn't exist. That came a little later. They were first to the party, I think.
Yep.
And then the quality improved over time so much. Like with,
Yes.
I think,
Immensely.
like GPT-4, I think, was the first one where you could really feel the jump. Like it suddenly was good. And since then, it has grown a little more subtle. But if you use like Claude Code, for example,
Yeah.
the gaps, like the quality in output, has still grown, I would say, significantly over the last year. If I look at the quality of what these tools you can now do versus what you could do a year ago, I would say the error rate has probably dropped by at least 50%, if not 80 or
Yes.
something like that. If you were like at
Yes.
90% before, 80 to 90, then you're now at 90, 95, 98 something.
Yes.
So the quality is really, really good now. I think that's also, you miss that a bit because for a lot of applications, I'm not sure if you see the quality difference as much, but in coding, you
Yeah.
see it.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. Because you're absolutely right. You unless you are really in it, like the differences mostly are very subtle. We did have some major exponential jumps that if you were in it, you saw and you felt it and you used it. And then now like they are a lot more subtle. And unfortunately, they're a lot more complex too, right? So it's like the error rates for what you are doing or what I'm doing have dropped dramatically, especially with the more infrastructure that's been built around it, right? Like that's the difference between talking to Claude AI, the chat, and having to copy a script out and talking to Claude Code, the IDE that has access to everything, right? There's a big infrastructural difference. So it's like that's one way that you'll now notice a quality difference if you try to do the same thing in both. But before, yeah, it was like unless you were coding, it was really just, oh, you can complain because it overuses M dashes or emojis or whatever was the flavor of the month to complain about at the time. AI is making images, but they have 6 fingers, things like that. It's kind of hard to hold on to just how amazing those jumps can be.
Yeah, and I think you have talked about 5 distinct levels of using Claude Code, right?
Yes.
Maybe you can also walk us through those. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So I really love this. A lot of people have come up with their own frameworks, and I don't want to replace that. If you have a framework of how you think about it and it helps you, you should keep using it and you should share it, right? You should talk to people. Everyone has an idea of how these things work, but a lot of people haven't really settled on language. How do I describe it? How do I explain it? How do I think about it? And so the 5 levels that I came up with was just trying to solve that. Was saying like every level is a kind of an input method that you do, and it is a friction point that you'll feel. So level 1 is raw prompting, right? So you open up Claude, you describe what you want, and it builds, right? This works surprisingly well for small tasks. But the ceiling is that your project will, grow past a small fit and you'll start to have all these issues, right? It's not doing it at the quality you want. It's not doing it at the, verbosity that you need. And so level 1, raw prompting. Level 2, Claude.md or agents.md if you use other models, right? This is a markdown file. This is at your project root. This is what the model reads. It's where you give it instructions and knowledge. But the thing is that at level 2, a lot of people are at level 2 in terms of their using Claude.md. They have a file, they have information in it. But what they don't realize is that about over 200 lines, it forgets whatever it has in it. It just does. You will literally lose out on information and instructions, right? So you need to keep it down. So level 2 is the Claude MD, but what level 2 actually is orchestration, right? It's not orchestration in the big term. It's routing, right? It's telling you, hey, I have skills here. I have files here. It's not giving them instructions. It's giving them a way so the model will pull up only what's needed. and you'll cut down on tokens because you're not going to be crawling the entire code base, right? So level 1, raw prompting. Level 2, Claude MD, but use it as a router. Don't use it as a literal instruction file. Level 3, we get into skills, right? This is where it starts to get really fun because skills unlock ability, capability, output, quality, everything, right? Everything that the model doesn't necessarily do super well, you can get with skills, right? So markdown protocol files, it teaches the agent specialized procedures, right? So raw prompting, Claude MD, skills. Level 4, hooks. This is where a lot of people I feel like are do have a gap. So hooks being like a JavaScript file, right, or using the post tool use or the various scripts to create these life cycles, right? So one that I have is I have a post tool use and I run it after every type check, after every edit. And so what this was, instead of like flooding the agent at the very end with everything that happened, you catch it while it goes. So what a hook is for, it's kind of like a net, right? It's a trigger. It hooks the person the moment that this trigger happens. And so hooks are where you start to mitigate errors. It's where you start to guard against the model drifting, right? Hooks are very powerful. That's level 4. And then the last level is orchestration. That's where you get to the parallel agents in isolated work trees. And that's where you get the persistent campaign files so that over a week, every agent you spin up never loses what the last one was doing or what you're currently working on. Right now, most projects, in my opinion, don't necessarily need orchestration, don't need parallel agents. Now, you can use them and you can get to where you're going faster, but I'm just saying that the use case of actually needing parallel agents is really only needed in high level or very specific cases. Lots of information, lots of separated work, lots of things like that. So just to cover 5 levels: raw prompting, the Claude MD or Agents MD, but use it as a router, skills, hooks, and orchestration.
Yeah, I would agree with the orchestration. So when I think about projects like smaller, even larger projects that I've worked on, if you look at how requirements come in, I think most of the time, surprisingly, you will be fast enough if you just take one requirement after each other and kind of work on it in a
Yes.
linear way. There's
Yep.
if you just find a way to continuously input those requirements, you will still be very fast. Don't get me, you can still be
Yes.
faster, I understand, but for a lot of use cases, implementation will take a minute, maybe
Yes.
something like that. If it's not a really large feature or something, so you're probably good, right? So if you think about, okay, I want to translate a whole application into 5 new languages,
Yes.
even a case like that, yeah, you can have a few agents. They will take different parts of the application. Maybe if you don't have translation implemented at all,
Yeah.
um, split it up, do the translation work. But how often will you do it? You will do it once in an application, and I think there are a lot of
Yes.
these use cases, right?
Yes. Yep. No,
So
you bring up such a great point.
yeah.
Please go ahead.
No, where do I use so what are good examples for using orchestration? Maybe you
Yes.
already wanted to answer that, but that would be my follow-up question.
Yeah, sorry. My brain was like, I know what to say. No. Okay. So yeah, or or orchestration. Yeah. So I'm very transparent in the sense that while Citadel, it talks about the coolest feature, which is parallel agents, right? It's being able to spin up 198 agents to go and do whatever you want to do, right? Like that's the hook. That's the cool thing. But I'm also transparent that in the same breath, I will tell everyone that orchestration's not for every project and it's not for every use case, or the parallel agents I should say, right? Yes, it's cool that I can spin up a fleet of agents, but it's just not needed for most things. And especially if it's not needed, you could be introducing a potential merge conflict or something like that. Now again, Citadel self solves that, but when you're talking about when I could just do it linearly and it takes a minute, or I could spin up fleets of agents and it takes 5 or 10 or whatever, right? Like that time difference can matter. I did solve that by having that /do router. So every time you prompt, it will decide, hey, does this benefit from a fleet or does it benefit from just me doing it? Do I need to call in skills or do I need to do something else, right? So I try to take that so you don't have to think about it. So yes, orchestration, parallel agents, amazing. Now, to answer your question, why do you use it, right? Why would you use it? One is scale, of course, right? If you're working on a bunch of things, or if you're working on, let's say, like you have 10 things you want to do, and none of them are even conflicting each other. They're all different things. I spin up a terminal and I say, hey, do this. And it goes off and it does that. And then I'm sitting there and I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm babysitting and I'm looking at what it says and I'm responding and whatever, right? Like that's a bottleneck. So what these parallel agents do is that you're able to tackle any kind of thing without having to babysit just one agent linearly. All the infrastructure's in place to do it. Now, the best use case that I've had for it that's consistent, I would do this every time, is research. Anytime that I tell the model to research, it spins up about 10 agents, a fleet of them, and it will pull in information from everything that I can find. Books, websites, blogs, videos, anything, GitHubs, whatever, like anything that's public, anything that's whatever. It'll pull that in and it will synthesize it into a document that then every agent after uses, right? Whenever you're developing. Now you learned this method, you learned this package, you learned this model, whatever it is. And one thing that I recently did is I was trying to see how well I could do the ARC-AGI 3 challenge, right? Which is an incredibly difficult challenge for anyone who doesn't know. It's trying to get computer models or machine learning to basically solve, spatial issues, right? Game theory, all sorts of things. And then you can drop it into a general game and it figures it out. So I was using Citadel to research that and spinning up fleets of agents and getting all the information. And I developed my own agent to play the first level. This is just the first level. I'm not trying to claim anything amazing, but the research that I did, pulling in game theory, pulling in machine learning techniques, pulling in everything, I was able to build an agent that could solve the first level in 14 moves, which the number of moves that a human can do it is 7. So it's pretty decent, right? I started at 24. I then broke some things, went up to 26, then went down to 14, right? And so having fleets of agents to pull in research for any topic you want, anything, it doesn't matter what it is. That's something that I find useful every time.
And I think this is also an interesting discussion point, right? So if we abstracted this and said, maybe you don't want to use coding agents, you want to build a
Yeah.
fleet of agents that run a company or something. What would be
Yes.
the way to translate this? What is the step that is needed to build Citadel into something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're trying to, just to make sure I'm asking, you're not asking how does Citadel become a company. You're asking how would Citadel ultimately run a company if it kind of abstracted to that. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. Like if I wanted to have
Perfect.
yeah, if I, so more like general agents, right? You already
Yeah.
said you have kind of a project manager. Now you have your
Yes.
programmer. Maybe you need something else, like a marketer. So how
Yes.
could you do it? So would
Yes.
be the way to translate this framework into and like agents, different agents?
So this is actually one of the coolest things conceptually and maybe philosophically, right? And that is that any problem that you talk about, right? Like everything you just said is definable. I'm not saying that it's simple, but it is definable, right? I can make an agent that just does autopilot work. And then I could make an agent that, manages those autopilots and also creates campaigns. And then I can create an agent above that that manages that person, right? And has persistence and does whatever. So everything can be created for. And the way that I would do it for Citadel, and I have thought about this, is it's basically about orienting the infrastructure to the use case. And you can do that for anything. So now, if it was the business, I would have it connected to, say, my social media, my marketing ad spend, right? I'd have that data come in, things like that. And the agents themselves don't care about what the task is. They just care about being routed to their use case. So right now with the agents already in place, you could spin up something that would do exactly what you're talking about. But the abstraction I've thought about above that is I've kind of thought about it like I don't know if you've ever played this game, so it might not be a great reference. But the game is called XCOM, and it's a top-down game where you control these soldiers in a sci-fi world, and you bring them around. It's turn-based, and you got to do moves and whatever. The cool thing about that game is that every soldier that you have is persistent. They have one life and they gain skills, they gain abilities, they gain things like that. And so you choose when to deploy them. Citadel is the same thing. Whereas eventually the abstraction becomes create an agent, right? Or forge a skill, things like that. Like you'll have tools to build that. And then you could build out an agent exactly the way you want it to. And guess what would build the agent? It would be Citadel, right? You would literally tell Citadel to build this agent that does this thing. And hopefully, when it comes to that, there would be an actual UI interface you could play with rather than just focusing on the terminal. But yes, you can certainly abstract it out to that, and the infrastructure supports it.
Yeah, I think this is one of the larger topics that we're currently seeing, right? So I think
Yeah. Yeah.
a lot of thought is if we solve coding, we have already solved a lot because
Yes.
then we can just build all the other stuff. But um, the other step will be to not only automate the coding. I think it's a pretty small part at the end of the day of running
It is.
a business, for example. But there is a lot of other stuff that needs to be done, and I'm really interested in if you can orchestrate a fleet of agents, and it makes so much sense to say I want to have specialized agents and orchestrate
Yes.
them for different functions.
Yes. Yeah, so the abstraction becomes routing to the specialized agents, right? So we can already route, we can already orchestrate, and we can already choose based off of, various information on what your prompt is or what your project is. And we can already orchestrate it to the right person. We can create the right documentation. We can solve the right errors. So all it becomes is pointing it to that. And but more importantly, it's not just pointing Citadel to it, it's pointing Citadel to build the infrastructure for it, right? Because that's what you're going to need. You're going to need that specialized agent for that use case. You're going to need those specialized skills that matter to you. Your voice, for instance, if you have a specific brand, you need a voice profile document that it pulls in to kind of understand that. So that's how people should think. I see so many people on X complaining about vibe marketing isn't a thing, right? It's like, okay, yeah, I can spin up my code, but I can't market it. I can't whatever. I totally see that gap, but at the same time, I really don't think it's that much of an issue. I just think right now it's manual. So if I was like a marketer, I am looking at my, Facebook ad analytics, and which I've used before, so I do know a lot about it. But I've used that. I'm looking at that. I pull all that data into Claude, and then I say, "Hey, this is my response. This is my copy. This is whatever. What can I do better?" Right? Like vibe marketing is kind of a thing, but it's manual. What people are looking for is just I want to open up a website. I want it to already have all my context, all my information, and I want it to do the thing. And then what you're talking about abstracted above that is I want to deploy a thing like Citadel to do it for me. And I can direct it, I can talk to it, I can influence it, but it's going to handle a lot of that heavy lifting. And so it's kind of like the idea like the future's here now. You can do all that now. The models are capable now. It's just an infrastructural gap that either you yourself can build for yourself, or I'm certain there's like the moment that I start and I decide, hey, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna make that. I'm gonna see 10 other people already made it. You know what I mean? I really think it's something that people are working on heavily right now.
100%. And then for Citadel itself, what is next? So, what are you planning about it? Did you already build it into a company? Are you planning to build it into a company? Will it stay just this open source project? What's next?
Yes. So the big moment was open sourcing it and posting it, right? That was the big moment. I didn't, it literally days before I did this, like 2 days, 3 days, I was not planning this. It came together that quickly. And I was not planning it. I was working on my project. I was trying to make something else that was going to become, a SaaS and that kind of thing in a different space. And then I was talking to Claude or to AI or to whatever, and I'm just sitting there and they're like, I had to do research. I was like, hey, how far along am I compared to the marketplace, right? Compared to other people, compared to options. And it was like, I'm going to be honest with you. All right. You're treating this project over here, this world building thing as the thing. This is the thing. These are all the areas you're ahead right now. And that window is temporary. At least it feels that way. And I feel that way too. I think there's a lot of things that Anthropic and other big models are just not going to solve. And I think all those issues are in operations rather than intelligence, or even orchestration. I think they're going to solve that. But what Citadel does is it fills all the operation gaps. It does all the things that you don't need to think about. So the big moment was sharing that. Everybody came back and immediately, I got 400 stars on GitHub. I got almost 1,000 downloads in 9 days. Right. I have friends using it to. One of my buddies built a GoPro app with it that had a lot of the premium features of GoPro for free that he can use from his phone. Another friend of mine has his own trading card game site called Deck Planet, and I was able to use it on that to fulfill 5 milestones that was kind of bugging him down for a bit. And then I've had so many people reach out to me directly on X and on Reddit asking me questions, saying, "Hey, I'm already using this in production. It's great. I'm pretty sure it's cut down on token spend. Like things like that." So I got an amazing response. And now, what is next? So I started abstracting the next version of Citadel. I'm going to keep the engine open source. That's going to be open source. Anybody can use it. I want people to use it. Fork it over, use it in your own project, use it in production. It doesn't take anything away from me to share this. So that's first. Second, I am working towards a Citadel Pro, which is for people who don't want to set it up in the terminal, people who don't want to worry about all those extra abstractions. And that's going to also come with a lot of infrastructure that I just can't do in the terminal, right? Things like having UI, having agents that feel a little bit more alive, agents that you can customize and build like a like an RPG. I don't want to make it into a video game, but I'm just saying like these are like elements that you'll feel to it. So I have done that. I have reached out to VCs and funding. A couple people told me to apply to programs. I sent a pitch deck this morning to someone who asked. So the company is kind of coming together, and that's hopefully what's next. But if ultimately Citadel is not the exact thing, there are so many things to be doing right now. There's so many gaps, and then the operations one is just the one that I see the biggest right now.
I think this is really interesting. Tess, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm really excited to see how Citadel will go. And to you, my listener, see you next time.
Thank you, Niklas, so much. I hope after it succeeds, I'll be back.